AI in 2025 is going to be completely different. In this video, I'll quickly give you an overview of all the changes and the trends that we are currently seeing. So I'll show you some of the current applications of AI, both in software and hardware. Is there still low-hanging fruit or is it already gone in case you're building something? There's a bunch of competition now between AI providers and models. So it's not just OpenAI anymore. There's a bunch of other players now. So there's a bunch of talk about that these models have hit their ceiling, because how much better can a model really get? Once you've soaked up almost all the data on the internet, all the text on the internet, where do you go from there? How much better can it really get? I can now also put in way more tokens into my prompt than before. And so does that mean that we don't need RAG anymore? Well, I'll quickly discuss what RAG is. These models are pretty good at text and generating images and even audio, but we haven't seen much about videos yet. We're basically just seeing a bunch of clips, a bit gimmicky still. So I would say 2025 is going to be very important for video. I think this is going to be, that's like the next stage of these models. A very underrated trend is that these models are also smaller, or these providers, they're offering smaller versions like a mini version or nano version, Gemini Nano. Why is that important? It's actually really important because it makes it easier to embed a model in the user's device. So for example, on your mobile phone or in the browser, it's actually really important. I'll show you a quick demo that Google created to show that in the browser. All right, so we see this buzzword agent everywhere. I put it in quotation marks because a lot of people are actually quite skeptical. Is this really something, or is it just hype? What does it even mean, an agent? I'll show you an example of that. All right, so I'll show you all of that. Now you can see I have a bunch of tabs open here, and it all has to do with DataCamp. They are today's sponsor. DataCamp has a really high quality platform here for learning AI. So if you want to get into AI, now is the time. Make sure you check out the link in the description. I had a great time looking into their platform. I'll show you all about that later in the video as well. They even give you a certification, by the way. They have some really high quality projects as well. So it's not just reading text or watching videos. You actually can get hands-on here in the data lab. And one of the things I really like is it's not just separate isolated pieces of content like one course and then a random other course. They actually have created career tracks. So if you really want to have a more guided way of studying AI, I highly recommend that you check out their AI track. So they have one for AI engineers, and they have a lot of content also if you're a developer. So it's not just for beginners, although it's great for beginners. They also have some more intermediate and more advanced content. So that's about DataCamp. I'll show you more of them in the video as well. Let's quickly go through the list here so you have a good view of what's going to happen in 2025. All right, let's talk about AI and how it's actually practically used. What does that look like? So I'm a developer. I write code, and previously, if you wanted to write code, you would have to manually type it out completely yourself. But now if I type here, you can see I'm getting a suggestion here. This is from an AI, right? So an AI, all this great text here is a suggestion. I can press tab to accept the suggestion, and this is actually exactly what I want. It's actually really, really good. I make programming tutorials, and I used to get a couple comments from people asking me what extension was I using to get these suggestions, but lately I haven't been getting those questions anymore. So I think all developers, they have caught on. I'm using GitHub Copilot for these suggestions, and it's really, really good, and it has basically already transformed coding. So I would say coding is one of the major use cases for these LLMs, right? So code is essentially just text, right? It's just a sequence of characters, and we see a lot of innovation here with AI in processing text, and so coding is all about text essentially, and it's been transformed by these copilots. So that's just coding, but what I've noticed is every space that has to do with text has some kind of tool now that is applying AI for that particular niche. So for example, there is something called Jenny AI if you're a research assistant. So as an example here, you can see they also suggest text, and then also it makes it easier to find the citation. Really a dedicated tool for researchers. And then there's also Harvey AI, which is going after the legal space, right? So of course the legal space all about text. So you would expect that these LLMs have some added value there. So I would say these applications right now, a year ago or maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we didn't know yet exactly where the applications of AI would be. But I would say now we have a pretty good idea of where it's going to be applied, and a lot of the low-hanging fruit, I would say, has been taken. But there are probably still some opportunities. So that's mostly text. And now these AI models are also pretty good at generating images these days. So actually I was using this image in some tutorial. I needed to explain what a server was. Now I can generate an image here in ChatGPT. I could say generate image of data center, and it will generate an image for me. But I have to say, a lot of these images, I mean, it's really good, but they also still have a bit of an AI look to them. And sometimes you don't want to have that AI look. So I actually went to a stock photo website, and I noticed that they actually reduced their prices because they are competing against all of these AI models generating images for free, essentially. I actually found this image that they had here, and this actually looks AI generated to me as well. So maybe some of their stock providers are actually also using AI generated photos in there. That's an example of an industry that has been completely transformed by AI, the stock photos. So those are software applications. Now about hardware, we want to know about robotics, right? Because it's all about robots. That's going to be the next big trend. Robots and AI together are really like a mega trend. So in terms of robotics, what do we really see about it? Well, as a consumer, you probably don't see much about it except for self-driving cars. For example, Waymo now offers basically autonomous vehicles without a driver in huge parts of large cities in the US. So they have Phoenix here, they have Los Angeles to a large degree, and even Austin. The reason that's possible is, of course, thanks to many other software, but one of the reasons is that AI has made image recognition really good. So with cameras, you can interpret almost everything that's around you. Now, of course, there's been a lot of labeling, etc. But in terms of hardware, AI has made vision really, really powerful. So a robot can see what's around it. It's not just Waymo, there's also Cruise, Tesla, and that's just cars. But there's drones now. Drones are really taking off on the battlefield because they can see what's around them, and so they can navigate better. And there's a bunch of robotics with AI in warehouses, manufacturing. I would say it's mostly because AI has made it easier to see with a camera what's going on. All right, so there's a bunch of competition now. Initially, it was about OpenAI. In the mainstream, people only know about ChatGPT. So if you just ask a regular person on the street, they're just gonna know about ChatGPT, right? Which is basically just a chat interface to OpenAI's models, right? So there's a chat user interface, right? And when you write a message in here, right? When I say another one, please, what I'm just doing there is I'm sending a prompt to the model here. But a lot of the revenue that OpenAI is getting is just through API calls, right? So I can also programmatically make an API call to the OpenAI model, right? But most people only know about ChatGPT. That is just this part. If you're a developer, you probably have also heard of the other ones. So there is Anthropic with Claude. A lot of people are now saying that this is just as good as OpenAI's models. There seems to be pretty heated competition between these two. And because there's now more competition, what I've seen some apps do is they switch between these models depending on which one is cheaper at a particular moment in time, or which is maybe a little bit better at some specific prompt type. You want to be a little bit careful with spending a lot of time prompt engineering, as they call it, because if you really fine-tune a particular prompt just for OpenAI's model, and then later it turns out that for your particular use case, Claude or Gemini is suddenly performing better, well, now you've spent a lot of time fine-tuning your prompts and that may not work for the other provider models. Now, Meta actually has a really interesting strategy, which is they also have created these AI models, but they actually offer them for free open source, right? So they have a completely different strategy. They want to be in this game, and they have a completely different strategy. Then there is Google actually with Gemini, but I will show you later as well. They have Gemini Nano as well, which is really interesting because this can be embedded in the browser, which is really going to be a game changer once that gets going. There's also xAI with Grok. They are raising a lot of money, and they seem to be catching up to the other ones as well. So we can see that there's a bunch of more competition now, and they're all pretty good by now. And in fact, if you've been using them the past few months, they kind of feel the same, right? It's not like they are so much better than, let's say, 6 months ago. Let's say, to me at least, it feels the same as 6 months ago. So some people are talking about that they hit a ceiling. So the idea is, and what has been for a long time, that the more data you give a model during training, the better it will become. That is true, of course, but at some point, once you've given a model, let's say 80% of the text on the internet, maybe it has already hit its maximum capability. So then if you try to give even more text, yeah, it may get a little bit better, but you're starting to hit diminishing returns. And so maybe that's why in the past few months or so, it doesn't really feel like it has improved substantially. So it's hard to say, but it's the certainty that there's going to be a bunch more compute being thrown at a bunch of investments here in data centers. There's really a lot of compute being built out. You can also see it in the Nvidia revenue. So in the most recent quarterly revenue release are doing 94% more than a year ago. But there's a bunch of extra compute coming online in 2025, and we'll see if it really can improve performance or if there needs to be some kind of architectural change in these models. So we'll just have to wait and see on whether all of that extra compute will lead to improved performance. If you're using an AI model, you can now also send much bigger prompts. So there's actually a great article about this from Matt Rickard. You can find it at this URL, the context length observation. And you can see that since 2018, it has increased rapidly, at least for OpenAI, the GPT model. So even 2 years ago, it was about 4,000. Now it's 128,000 tokens. So you can imagine that this will grow as well. And does that mean that we don't need RAG anymore? So what is RAG? So let's say you have a prompt like, what does Wikipedia have to say about the Atlantic Ocean? To really get a good answer here, the AI model needs to know what Wikipedia has written about the Atlantic Ocean. Now, I cannot send Wikipedia in its entirety to the AI model, right? Because that's too much. And so I cannot just send it directly to the AI model. First, I have to retrieve a specific part of Wikipedia with RAG, and that will give me, let's say, the Wikipedia article on the Atlantic Ocean. So a more confined subset, essentially, of all the data. The actual prompt that we're sending to the AI model is just going to be this original question with that added context from the RAG. The total prompt is still going to be a little bit bigger, but it's going to be within the limits of context window. So that's why we're using RAG. But if you have unlimited context length, I don't need to do that anymore. I could technically maybe just send the entire thing, all of Wikipedia with my prompt. I have unlimited space here. So I don't need to do any step in between, add latency, add more compute. I can just send everything one big giant prompt to the AI model. That is essentially what a lot of people are hoping for will happen at some point. With 128,000, that's not possible yet, but you can imagine that this will continue to grow. It may be possible that RAG is going to be affected by that, in the sense that it may not be as necessary anymore. But for now, of course, it still has a place. I've personally noticed as a developer that if I have a huge file with, let's say, thousands of lines of code, the suggestions that I get from my Copilot here are worse, or it takes longer. So it seems that, because what the Copilot will do essentially is it will take my entire file content and that will use it as a prompt for the AI model. So if you have a huge prompt, it's possible that there's still some kind of limited attention and the results are worse. So even if you have more context length, it doesn't mean that you get better results. So it may actually still be the case that RAG is necessary for a long time. We've seen these models, they're really good at text and even images, although I have to say the images still quite look AI generated in many cases, even audio. But what we haven't really seen much are actually videos. There are some clips out there, but it's still in the gimmicky stage, I would say. I think 2025 could be the year where video really takes off. So for example, OpenAI has mentioned the Sora model. You can create videos from text. They seem to have been working on this for quite some time. Now, video is going to be very complex, of course, so it's not strange that it has taken some time. But 2025 could really be the year where video breaks through and these AI models are gonna be able to produce high quality videos. All right, so many of these providers now also have a special smaller model. Google has Gemini, but also Gemini Nano. This means that these models can now also be on your device. So previously, for example, here, if I'm coding here and I type something here, you can see it takes like a second or so before I get a result, right? So if I close here, before I get a result, it takes like a second or so. That's because it has to take the contents of my code editor on my own computer and it has to go over the internet to an AI model, right? Maybe this is on some server in another country, let's say, right? So it has to go through the internet cables all the way to some AI model in some server and then back again. There's no way around it. That's going to take some time. It could take, like we saw, like a second or 2 seconds. Now, what's really promising about these smaller models is that's not necessary. If the AI model is small enough, I can just download it on my computer. So we don't even have to go over the internet anymore. You also don't need an internet connection at that point. So there's actually a demo here of Gemini Nano, which means you can add it to your browser. Let's say Google Chrome. You can see the writing a prompt and it instantly gives you, or it starts streaming at least, a result. So there's no latency almost anymore. If you have a complex prompt, it may actually still need some processing time, but you can see it so fast. It's going to be, I think, a real game changer for a lot of apps where you can almost instantly get a result for a particular prompt. And of course, you don't need an internet connection either. So sometimes internet can still be spotty. So I'm actually really excited about the smaller models. I think that's actually very an underrated trend. All right, so you're going to hear about agents all the time. It's a bit of a buzzword. There may be something to it though. So is an agent just a traditional software? Well, what is a traditional software? Well, traditional software can do a specific activity very well. So for example, if I have an app and I want to send an email whenever a new user signs up, right? So a new user signs up and I write some code to send an email. So that's going to be the same task every time a user signs up, right? It's a very, very narrow, very well-defined, specific task that needs to be done. So that's a traditional software that can do really, you can just sort of hard code some specific rules and it will do that. Now, what if you have a more open-ended task, like fixing GitHub issues? So I'm telling a piece of software, hey, fix the GitHub issue. So this is more open-ended because every GitHub issue is going to be different and the way to solve them is going to be different. So it would first need to actually find a GitHub issue and then it needs to decide which tool to use to learn more about what that issue is about. Maybe there's a GitHub issue about the navigation not properly working on a website. So then it needs to learn more about how navigation should work, right? So it's gonna maybe have to do a Google search, right? So it needs to invoke some web search tool, it needs to learn more about it. Then it needs to reproduce the bug. Well, which tools do you need for that? Maybe a code editor. And then it needs to actually write code, generate code to fix the bug. It needs to write a test to verify it fixes the bug, eventually actually making a pull request to finish off the issue. So this is a more broad task that would be really hard to come up with a bunch of rules for and hard code it and then sort of code an app for that or something like that, right? Because it's so dependent on each issue. That's the idea of agents. Now, a lot of people are going to be skeptical about that. So I think this year we'll also see if this really has something to it, or maybe it's just a bit hyped. But if you want to get into AI, I highly recommend that you check out DataCamp. They are today's sponsor. So you can find a link in the description. And the reason I recommend it is because they have really guided learning here. So you can start off with just the fundamentals, for example, with the AI fundamentals track. So I like these tracks because it's not just a bunch of isolated pieces of content or random courses that you have to sort of figure out yourself. No, they actually show you step by step what to learn. You learn about ChatGPT, about machine learning and the basics, but they have so much more. So it will get to a more intermediate level and eventually a more advanced level as well. So when you're just starting out, you're going to learn about AI fundamentals and ChatGPT and OpenAI in particular. But it's not just watching videos or reading text. They actually have code alongs here. So here in my dashboard, I have code alongs here. So you can code along with somebody who's doing a particular task step by step. You can also do these projects. So with a project like this, you are actually going to use the OpenAI API. So here, for example, they introduced a project. You're going to become an AI developer and you're going to create a project that has to do with planning trips, and you're going to use the OpenAI API for that. Okay, so here you need to sign up with OpenAI and you're actually going to get an API key because you're actually going to make these API calls to their models, right? So you can then code in here and you have your environment variables. So really nice environment here to learn all about that. So it's not just consuming text or videos, you're actually going to practice it with what you learn. So that is all the fundamentals. They show you how to actually use it practically and in a useful way. So here they show you developing AI applications. So you're actually going to create apps with not just the OpenAI, they also use Hugging Face and LangChain. They show you semantic search, like a RAG type of apps and tutorials. You need to learn about embeddings, right? This is for RAG. We want to make sure that we can add relevant pieces of information to our prompt efficiently. And it can get much more advanced. So here they even talk about how to develop large LLMs, how to train an LLM with PyTorch, also how to work with Hugging Face. So you learn all about these tools in the ecosystem, how to debug and test LLMs. And you can also get certification, right? So make sure you check out DataCamp. I would start off with one of these tracks. So for example, the AI application track. If you just want to get started building AI applications and you want to skip the beginner theory, you just want to get started, you want to work with the OpenAI API, you want to start with that project, you want to learn how to work with Hugging Face, how to develop an AI system with an AI model, right? They even show you best practices for production applications. So it's not just for beginners, it's actually quite an intermediate and advanced level as well. You learn about embeddings, vector databases, developing LLM applications with LangChain. Right, so this is already more intermediate, advanced. It's not just for beginners. So depending on what your current knowledge about AI is, you can get started with a more beginner level with the AI fundamentals track, or if you already know the fundamentals, I would start with this one. Right, so make sure you check out the links in the description. I want to thank DataCamp for sponsoring this video, and I want to thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe and check out my next video in a couple months about the state of AI. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.